Today, I've actually got some good news. News from the 10th Amendment and Nullification Movement. It's nice to see a little silver lining with all the bad stuff happening all around us. Of course, everyone in their right mind is worried about a central bank digital currency, a CBDC controlling, well, pretty much everything. Plus inflation and prohibition. We want to stop surveillance and tracking of gun purchases, and a heck of a lot more, too. But on this episode, I'm going to dive into a bunch of powerful new state laws that are going into effect or already have gone into effect this summer and push back against centralized power in support of liberty and freedom. We're talking about things like the Second Amendment Financial Privacy Act, rejecting a central bank digital currency, putting up roadblocks to its implementation, and in support of both raw milk and sound money. I'll get to all that in just a moment, but first of all, welcome and thank you for joining me here on the path to liberty. My name is Michael Bolden with the 10th Amendment Center, and this is the show for July 10th, 2024, and we always follow Thomas Jefferson's advice when it comes to pushing forward. In a great letter to the Reverend Charles Clay in 1790, he said, "The ground of liberty is to be gained by inches. We must be contented to secure what we can get from time to time and eternally press forward for what is yet to get." And I'm just paraphrasing off the top of my head. I believe he explained why as well. He said, it takes time to convince people even what is for their own good. So we have to lead by example, and we're doing our best to show you the stuff, well, that probably almost no one else is covering these days. And I want to start out with a number of state laws against a central bank digital currency. A few of them went into effect on the 1st of July. Where in South Dakota, as Mike Meharry reports, 3 laws went into effect that take steps to reject a CBDC. We've got House Bill 1163 and Senate Bill 58. They expressly exclude a CBDC from the definition of money in South Dakota. And then we also have HB 1161, which prohibits state agencies from even accepting any type of CBDC as a form of payment. Now, rather than waiting for something to get entrenched, as also Jefferson said, he said the time to take action is before he's got his talons in you. You got to try to stop them before they get their teeth sunk into you. And I'm actually really excited about the fact that we see some state actions against the central bank digital currency before it's even implemented. Here from HB 1163, they say the term is not, so defining money in the Uniform Commercial Code, the term is not intended and cannot be construed to create or adopt a central bank digital currency. That's now in the official definition of the code. And then in SB 58, it specifically excludes CBDC from the definition of money as used in the South Carolina chapter regulating money transmission. So they're just putting up some roadblocks, making it difficult to use under state law. In HB 1161, I want to get to that third one in South Dakota because it's unusual that they pass 3 different ones at the same time. Generally, we see one small step at a time, so this is interesting. House Bill 1161 specifically bars payments to the state in a central bank digital currency. It says, quote, "Neither the state nor any of its agencies or subdivisions may accept a central bank digital currency, whether foreign or domestic, as payment for taxes, fees, tuition, admission, the settlement of any account or debt, or any other purpose." So fully rejecting it there in South Dakota. Moving forward to Indiana, they've done this in a matter of 2 years. So last year, Indiana was the first state to enact a law that removed a CBDC from the definition of money in the state UCC, the Uniform Commercial Code. This is a narrow approach, but you can learn more about that. I'll have an episode that you can learn more. So on June 9th of this year, Senator Eric Koch introduced SB 180 to expand on that. And this is, again, the strategy. The ground of liberty is to be gained by inches. You take one small step, you eternally press forward for what is yet to get. You take another small step and another and another and another. But you take as much as you can. You always push for more. These are sometimes small steps, but we want wins. The new law, Mike Meharry reports, prohibits state agencies from accepting payments made with a CBDC for any service, tax, license, permit, fee, information, or any other amount due the governmental body. And it also bars government agents agencies from requiring payments to be made with a CBDC. So they've done kind of what South Dakota did all this year, but last year they first removed it from the definition of money in the UCC, and this year they're following up saying, we're not going to accept any payments. So at least the state of South Dakota won't participate. Additionally, under the state law, government bodies are prohibited from even advocating or supporting the testing, adoption, or implementation of a CBDC by the U.S. government. That's in Indiana. Now, a similar law was passed by both chambers in the North Carolina legislature. So they passed a law that would prohibit any state government agency from accepting a payment using a CBDC and to bar all state government agencies from participating in any test. So they're doing that smaller step first. They have not removed it from the definition of money, from my understanding, in North Carolina. But surprise, surprise, North Carolina passes this, and what do we get from Governor Cooper? Of course, it's a veto. I've got a veto message from him right here on House Bill 690. He just vetoed it. Well, it looks like 5 days ago. On July 5th, his first day of work after Independence Day, of course, he's going to reject something that might take a step against an unconstitutional central bank digital currency. And here's how he put it. I thought this was worth reading. Because we want to understand the mentality of the enemy. I guess that's a good way to put it with Roy. Efforts are being made at the federal level to ensure standards and safeguards are in place to protect consumers, investors, and businesses that may want to make monetary transaction in digital assets. And North Carolina should wait to see how they work before taking action. So the lie is that this is just about digital assets. No, it is only a specific rejection of accepting payments from a government-run central bank digital currency. It says nothing about digital assets as a whole. So what he's doing here is he's wording this. He's using manipulative language so people look at this and say, oh, well, I'm in this digital asset. I've got a Bitcoin ETF. Why would I want my state to reject that if they want to accept that as a payment? So Cooper is definitely a liar here. He's not. Well, it's a lie to me. North Carolina should wait to see how it works before taking action. This legislation is premature. No, as Thomas Jefferson said, the time to take action is before the talons have been sunk into your body, not after they've already done the damaging thing. So it's actually right on schedule. It's vague and reactionary and proposes an end result on important monetary decisions that haven't even been made yet. Instead of this bill, the legislature should have passed a budget to provide more funding for cybersecurity threats that actually exist now. In other words, spend more money and be fully on board with the federal government being able to, they already are pretty much able to print at will, but at least up until the monetary reality hits them and the inflation gets too out of control. But certainly, this is a very bad mentality. But in North Carolina, they do have a veto-proof majority. They are supposed to meet a handful of times between, I guess they received that veto message. They met on the 5th, and then they're going to meet a handful of times. I don't know the dates between now and the end of the year. Last year, I think they overrode a bunch of them. The governor vetoes a bunch of stuff, and then they just override it. Veto and then override. Now, it's a very narrow majority, but this bill passed, I think, by a vote of like 104 to 9. What was the vote? 39 to 5 and 109 to 4. So it has easy veto-proof majorities. And if just a handful of Roy's team goes with the veto override, we should see that go into effect sometime this year. So we'll be keeping an eye out on HB 690 or House Bill 690 in North Carolina. Now, in Georgia, they took that North Carolina bill and actually got it signed into law. That's House Bill 1053. It prohibits a state government agency from accepting a payment using a CBDC and bars all state government agencies from participating in any tests of a CBDC. And I like that they included this in the legislative findings. At least they made a statement of principle about it as well in Georgia. In House Bill 1053, it says, a central bank digital currency would be an unacceptable expansion of federal authority by giving the federal government unprecedented control of the lives, freedoms, choices, and sovereignty of the people of Georgia. Man, that is an awesome message that's really, really kind of in line with many of the founding principles behind the 10th Amendment that come right from the American Revolution. It's rare to see something like this when they're talking about the sovereignty or final authority of the people of a state. So House Bill 1053 went into effect on July 1st. Now, none of these, it's really important to point out that none of these state laws on their own will have any chance of stopping a central bank digital currency. It's literally impossible. But they are part of a movement that is almost exactly following James Madison's advice and strategy on how to stop federal programs without relying on the feds to magically do something they never do, which is limit their own power, or maybe they do once every few decades. So in other words, a really, really bad strategy is going to the government and saying, please stop this. Oh, you better stop this. It doesn't work in almost every situation. So I covered James Madison's strategy from Federalist number 46 and applied it directly to a central bank digital currency in an episode that I did last year, James Madison versus a CBDC. So if you want to learn more about that strategy and how Madison said to beat federal programs and how those state laws are a part of a four-step strategy that's actually being implemented in various states. We need much more of it. That'll be linked to in the show notes over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/path to liberty. Now, I want to move forward to raw milk. There's been a lot of discussion about raw milk, and they're making it kind of a culture war thing. Of course, they want to get people choosing to support or oppose the freedom of choice of people based on a political viewpoint. I mean, the idea that someone should be able to consume what they want to consume, to buy and sell the things that they want to buy and sell, is just free trade. Let our trade be as free as air, is how Pelatiah Webster, a kind of a forgotten, unknown founder, put it. Thomas Jefferson said, the essential principle of the government when he was in his first term as president, he basically said, just leave people free to do what they want to do with the fruits of their own labor. Just protect people from harming each other, from actually actively harming each other. So if someone makes a free choice to purchase unpasteurized milk or just milk, that should be their choice. That's the only kind I can drink. I have an allergy, and I've learned over the years, it's fascinating. It's fascinating that the only type of milk, cheese, etc., and I grew up in Wisconsin, so I was always ill as a kid. The only time I can actually consume without getting sick is the unpasteurized one. They want to tell us, of course, that that's the one that's going to make you sick all the time. Well, there are people like me, and luckily for this one, I live in California where I can pick up whatever I want raw wherever. Anyways, here from West Virginia, they have a 2016 law that authorized just selling raw milk in a herd share agreement. So basically, you kind of have to have a co-op where people say, oh, I'm going to own this cow together. And then people could go to the farm and then pick up their raw milk, and maybe there would be extra money paid for people to maintain it, etc. Now, they expanded that just this year. It went into effect this last month in June of 2024. To expand it to full retail sales. Here from Meharry's report, he said, on June 7th, a law legalizing retail raw milk sales with no restrictions or limits beyond just labeling went into effect in West Virginia. So they can sell raw milk in retail stores now, rather than just on a farm, and you have to prove that you're part owner of the cow. I mean, that's a step forward. Again, the ground of liberty is to be gained by inches, and if we start with one thing, and then people learn that the world doesn't end when you start with the one thing, then you follow up with another. Eternally press forward is how Jefferson put it. Meharry points out that under the new law, retailers can sell raw milk in the state. Retailers, so at the store, as long as the container is clearly labeled as unpasteurized raw milk and includes the name and physical address of the seller, the date of production, and the following warning. Consuming unpasteurized raw milk may increase your risk of foodborne illness, especially for children, elderly, immunocompromised individuals, persons with certain medical conditions. So to me, that's fine. I mean, it should be up to the producer and the consumer how they want to do these things. But, to actually open this up from zero sales, or I think they actually started with only being able to sell it as pet food. Then they expanded to herd share agreements and humans were allowed to consume it. Thank you, government, to now just label it and people can buy and sell where they want. Now, of course, we're not going to see this in the big chain stores because the chain stores generally don't carry this stuff if they are involved in interstate commerce. We do see a few chain stores that are in multiple states here in Southern California sell raw milk, raw dairy, for example, like Sprouts Farmers Market. You see it all around the Southwest. We have it available there as well. Now, in Delaware, and almost never report on Delaware, Senate Bill 273 was passed by both houses, both chambers in the legislature, the House and Senate, and they're off to the governor. And in the bill, it says the sale of raw milk, quote, is currently prohibited by Section 9 of the current U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Grade A Pasteurized Milk Ordinance. I was not aware of this. I guess I got to research into this more, but they're basically saying in a bill that they passed legalizing something that it's their belief, whether it's correct or not, that the federal government says it's illegal to do it, and they're doing it anyways. And this is the mentality we need on basically everything. They say, however, it's illegal. However, consumers are increasingly demanding the opportunity to purchase raw milk in Delaware rather than traveling to other states that permit raw milk sales. Allowing raw milk and products derived from raw milk to be sold in Delaware will respond to that demand while also providing new economic opportunities for Delaware dairy producers. I love the mentality. Right or wrong on whether I'm going to have to look into the federal regulation that they're referencing, but maybe there's something to it. I do know that Department of Health and Human Services do claim the power. Not only currently they ban it in interstate commerce, and they have their version of what the Commerce Clause means basically means they claim the power to ban it everywhere, but they have also specifically said in some lawsuits, maybe about a decade ago, that they also have the power to prohibit raw milk sales if it's produced and sold only within states, so in intrastate commerce. So this is their mentality. Delaware is actually looking at this, and they believe that the federal government holds it as illegal, and they're saying, we're going to do it anyways. Now, that is the way we have to approach everything. It's not a very expansive law, but it's a starting point. Senate Bill 273 would allow producers with a valid permit, got to get a permission slip, to sell raw milk and raw milk products directly to consumers. So not at retail stores, it's a starting point. So it passed the House by a vote of 39-2, and the Senate passed it by a vote of 14-5. It goes to Governor John Carney's desk. I'm not sure how long he has to sign or veto, but we'll be keeping an eye out on Senate Bill 273 in Delaware. Now, you want to read more about all of this stuff because I'm just covering it. I'm just scratching the surface on all this. And if you want to learn more about these bills and laws that are moving forward or have been going into effect, we'll have them all linked to in the show notes over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/path to liberty. For every single episode, my good buddy Alan Mosley does an awesome job organizing the blog post for every episode. You're going to find all the different platforms we're on. So we have all the video platforms, we have audio-only podcast platforms, and then you're going to find a show links section so you can read this stuff and learn more in context on your own time and maybe even share it around. So I'm just scrolling through here. If you're watching the video, you'll first see like a quick, there's the title and a quick overview. You scroll down a little bit, you've got the podcast player. You can download it. You can subscribe to various platforms. Then we have an embedded video, and then there's a show links section, and that's where all the stuff that I'm referencing, you can take a look at that and read and learn more. And while I'm here, I want to take a quick moment and say hello to everyone out in the live chat over on Rumble. We've got Dennis and Brewster and Gypsy, maybe a few others. I appreciate you guys being there. Of course, we live stream at Odyssey.com as well, which is an awesome platform. I love the stuff that is kind of outside the mainstream. Certainly, we live stream on YouTube and Facebook and all the big ones, X and LinkedIn and Twitch. I want to say hi to Kirk and Brewster and Rights Are Not Tradition and Haji and Hardknack Farms and Maggie, Stan, and everyone else. I know there's Jug and a few others, Valden Myers. Again, I appreciate you guys being here, whether this is your first episode or you've been here for every single one since day one. Anyways, let's get right back to it. We've covered raw milk and we've covered rejection of a central bank digital currency. And now I want to get into support for sound money. New Jersey, of all places, has really been pushing over the last couple of years to remove some taxes. I mean, if you were to stop anyone on the street that had any knowledge of anything that goes on politically in New Jersey, and you said, hey, what do you think the odds are of the state legislature, the assembly there, passing something that cuts out a tax, any tax, big, small, whatever? I think the odds are we'd all think, yeah, right, that's never happening. I certainly would think that here in California, but we've seen it happen on cannabis here and there. Well, they've passed now multiple times. They just did this time again. At the end of last month, the New Jersey Assembly and Senate unanimously approved a bill that would remove gold and silver bullion from state sales and use taxes. Taxing gold and silver is the government saying that gold and silver is not money? Well, we know it's the oldest money known to man. It is real, sound money. It's in the Constitution. Ron Paul, specifically in support of a similar bill on capital gains taxes in Arizona, said we ought not to tax money because paper is just fraud. If you tax money, you're basically creating a roadblock to its use as such. So this is only addressed as kind of an investment type of a thing, but the Assembly and the Senate, both political parties, passed this unanimously. What was it, 73-0 on June 28th in the Assembly, and then the Senate concurred with a vote of 40-0. It goes to our great buddy at Liberty. What is his name? Something Murray. Phil Murray. Now, we know that identical legislation, almost the exact same bill, if not the same bill, passed both the House and Senate just last year, right near the end of the session. They do a 2-year legislative session. Some states like Texas, Montana, they're only in session for a few months every other year. And that way, I guess they can do the least amount of damage. But places like California, New Jersey, Michigan that have these year-round legislative sessions, or New Jersey, it's a 2-year, year-round legislative session. I'm sure they go on break here and there. But they passed this right at the end of the last 2-year session. Governor Murphy refused to sign it. And in New Jersey, that creates a process called a pocket veto, which means, well, here from their glossary, it says this is the only type of veto. This is from the New Jersey legislature website. The only type of veto in which the governor does not return the bill to the legislature for a possible vote to override. So this is I'm sure this guy loves this one. If they pass anything late in the session, because it only applies to bills passed within the last 10 days of a 2-year legislative session. So if it's right at the end of the 2-year legislative session, it says the governor, in essence, pockets the bill. He just throws it away, stuffs it in his pocket, as the phrase goes. But he can't do it this time because that 2-year session just ended last December, and now we're in the first few months of the next 2-year session. So this one's going to the governor's desk, and if he vetoes it, they've passed it unanimously in both chambers. It's possible it's going to get an override. So we've got a similar, we'll keep an eye on that one as well. I believe it is Senate Bill 721. The companion is A2812, same legislation. We have a similar bill that went into effect as law in Kentucky. And again, this is even these small steps, like I think it's an important big step, but I think in the grand scheme of things, taking on the largest empire on the face of the earth, some people will think like, oh, removing a tax from the exchange of one currency for another, or of paper trash for gold and silver. Removing a tax on that isn't a huge deal. That's a small thing. But even those types of so-called small things are always resisted. Murphy vetoes it. We had the same thing happened in Kentucky. They passed this large piece of, I don't know if it was a revenue bill, and they included a section in there that removed gold and silver taxes on gold and silver. It passed the House by a vote of 87-9. The Senate approved it 34-0. So Governor B signed the bill, but used what they have in Kentucky, a line item veto to strike out the sales tax exemption for gold and silver. Meharry reports that the legislature overrode the line item veto, deeming it illegal. They said, oh, you can't even do this. So they went to the Attorney General because under the state constitution, the governor only has line item veto power on spending bills. The state's Attorney General, Russell Coleman, affirmed that the line item veto power does not exist for a revenue bill, giving further weight to the legislature's action. And that was a veto override of the governor's line item veto on the sales tax exemption on gold and silver. And so now the law will go into effect on August 1st of this year. I also want to mention one more bill on sound money. That is in Louisiana, which is now the 5th state, which it should be all 50, but the 5th state since Utah in 2011 to recognize gold and silver as they always were supposed to be recognized under the Constitution as legal tender, as money in the state. So Senate Bill 232 was signed into law by Governor Jeff Landry at the end of May, and it goes into effect on August 1st. Under the new law, any gold or silver coin, specie or bullion issued by any state or the U.S. government as legal tender shall be recognized as legal tender in the state of Louisiana. So Maybe there's something going on in Utah or another other state where they're recognizing something as legal tender in that state. So therefore, I know maybe this will apply to the gold back. You can learn more about gold back at goldback.com, I believe. The law goes into effect on August 1st in Louisiana. But this is interesting as well. Meharry reports that beyond the provisions to make gold and silver legal tender, the bill also specifies that no person shall incur any liability for refusal to accept recognized legal tender for the payment of debts, except as provided by contract. We're talking, this is what's called a gold clause, gold contract clause. I believe that is the proper way. So basically a gold clause saying that you can require payment in gold because many of the courts and many of the states and the federal government for many years basically said you couldn't require payment in gold. If they wanted to give you fiat, they'd be able to give you fiat, and that would really screw over people who wanted to use sound money, kind of creating a roadblock against its use. And Meharry reports that in practice, including this gold contract clause means if parties voluntarily agree to be paid or to pay in gold or silver coin or bullion, the Louisiana courts could not substitute any other thing like Federal Reserve notes as payment, just like Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution requires. So Senate Bill 232, treating gold and silver as legal tender in the state of Louisiana, and also at least this step towards authorizing or just getting out of the way of gold contract clauses, goes into effect on August 1st. And the other thing that I want to cover today is firearm purchaser privacy. So what many people call the Second Amendment Financial Privacy Act. I've covered it on this show a number of times, but let's get right to it. First of all, on July 1st, a number of state laws that address this went into effect. Here from Iowa, House Bill 2464, or House File. The new law prohibits a financial institution operating in Iowa from requiring or assigning a firearms code that distinguishes a firearm dealer from any other retailer. Gun grabbers love this stuff. Of course, we can pay by cash if we want, but we also should be able to pay by whatever form we want to pay without the fear that they are going to automatically track it and tag us. Oh, you're definitely purchasing something. Because if you go to a large sporting goods store, you might buy a couple of footballs or a surfboard. Well, I'm thinking surfboard. Maybe not the whole country is buying a surfboard. But you're buying stuff at your sporting goods store, and then you're picking up a shotgun or some ammunition. Well, they're going to make sure that they know that you didn't just buy sporting goods, you also bought a gun, because the gun grabbers have really been pushing for this type of granular tracking on purchases. We know that this is coming from so-called independent business organizations, the credit card processing companies, but it's certainly been pushed for by a number of people in Congress, and we know what happens when these anti-liberty, pro-gun grabbing businesses collect information. They're happy to share it with the feds, and the feds are happy to take it or demand that they get it. So we don't want this type of information collected. So in Iowa, plus a number of other states, they're saying you can't even do this in our state. It's also now illegal to deny a transaction based solely on the acquirer's assignment of a firearms code to the firearms retailer. So that might be a way that they start. In fact, some of the banking people who really want to stop gun purchases, they've said, hey, we want to use this code, so if we can maybe lock them down from making the purchase on our end. We'll do the dirty work for the ATF, which shouldn't exist in the first place. So we don't want banks operating as the ATF either. Under the law, Mike Meharry writes, government entities are also prohibited from keeping a registry of privately owned firearms or the ownership of privately owned firearms. So that's a very positive thing in Iowa. We also saw a similar law go into effect in Tennessee, almost the same provisions. Senate Bill 223 went into effect on July 1st. In Indiana, same bill. They're all little variances, but of course, this will be linked to in the show notes. Alan will get them all in there, and that way you can read the details, especially if it's something in your state you want to learn about this. House Bill 1084 in Indiana, another Second Amendment 2A Financial Privacy Act, went into effect on July 1st. Then we also have Kentucky has a similar one going into effect on July 14th. So just in a few days, that'll be going into effect in Kentucky. And then in Louisiana, that's Senate Bill 301 is going into effect on August 1st. So in a few more weeks, we'll see another one go into effect. So I think during the 2023 and 2024 legislative sessions, mind you, this was actually starting to be implemented in September of 2022. And almost immediately in early 2023, we saw a handful of states start introducing this type of legislation. This didn't come from us. Generally, a lot of these things start with us, but this certainly has been growing organically, which is really cool. We're starting to see more of these 10th Amendment approaches coming up on their own without us even coming up with the idea. So a number of states started just introducing them, and then a handful of them passed them last year. And I think the total is somewhere around 15 or 17 in the 2023 and 2024 legislative sessions. And just after 5 states were just starting to move forward with it. In response to legislation like this, the major credit card networks, Mike Meharry reports, paused implementation of the Firearms Merchant Code. So they implemented it in September of 2022. Then within a few months, a few states start introducing legislation. They start passing maybe one chamber at a time, but none of them had been signed into law yet. And just with that, like a paper tiger, they put it on pause. So that to us was a green light. Oh my goodness. They don't want inconsistency in the law, which is exactly what a federal system is all about. It's supposed to be inconsistent on most things. You don't have a one-size-fits-all solution. That's a nation state. We are a union of states, sovereign, independent states that decided to be united for certain delegated limited purposes. So in response to this legislation, they paused implementation. In an email to Reuters, a MasterCard representative said these kinds of bills would create inconsistency in how the code could be applied by merchants, banks, and payment networks. And Meharry's right. He said the more states that ban such codes, the more likely this program gets scrapped permanently. Now, we're ahead of the game here because they just started implementing it, and it hasn't actually gone into effect in many places. So all these states saying you can't do this. So then the credit card companies back down. Now, here in California, they just had a law go into effect that requires merchants to do this. So we're going to see that kind of thing happening. But the more roadblocks that are put up, the less likely we'll see these types of things ever get the strength that they need to control us. Now, of course, these are all just steps forward, and we can't be satisfied with the wins that we have. Now, of course, we're proud of positive things. We see the silver lining amongst all the terrible things around us. We want to highlight the good things happening and push forward for more. As Jefferson, of course, said, eternally press forward for what is yet to get. And here's how Samuel Adams put it. This is all good stuff, but they're far from the end of the story. He said, instead of sitting down satisfied with the efforts we have already made, which is the wish of our enemies, the necessity of the times more than ever calls for our utmost circumspection, deliberation, fortitude, and perseverance. In other words, keep pushing forward. Every step leads to another and another. We can never rest in the face of tyrants. Unfortunately, that's the reality. Now, we can actually apply this to all kinds of other stuff. I've only covered these 4 issues. We apply this on all kinds of things, and we're seeing it grow and grow in other areas against federal programs. And we cover this in some detail on our annual State of the Nullification Movement report. It's not up to the minute because it's a print copy, but you can also get an ebook copy downloaded. We'll update it again later this year as well. But you can get that over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/report. It goes into much more detail. It's like 150 pages. The first third or so talks about the founder's strategy, the old revolutionary strategy to defeat federal programs without relying on the government to limit itself, which is just stupid. And so it explains that. It tells you how it's been used in the past, how the founders said it should be used, and how it was applied. And then we're also covering, in probably the last 2/3 of it, much more than half, we're covering how it's being implemented on various issues today. So 10thamendmentcenter.com/report. And we've got a lot of work, but absolutely nothing. We got a lot of work to do yet because we're getting the ball rolling, but we're still living under the largest government in history. So we need your help. And nothing helps us do this kind of work, to follow the legislation, to work to get people in support of the legislation, to do the historical research, to do the writing, the blogging, the podcasting, all the stuff that we're doing. Literally, I have been working 10-hour days, 6 days a week. I've never worked so hard for so little in recent times. So we could certainly use your help. Nothing helps us do this work more than the financial faith and support of our members. You can join us for as little as $2 a month over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/members. If you got a couple of bucks of that dirty government fiat, please consider throwing it our way. Again, 10thamendmentcenter.com/members. We also have annual, 5-year, and lifetime options available, or you can do a one-time donation over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/donate. I really appreciate you being here. And if you want to learn more, again, if you like, rather than reading that 10th Amendment or the State of the Nullification Movement report, I've got another episode that I think you'll be interested in, which is called Constitution 101 Enforcement Mechanism. It may not be my best episode. I think it's pretty decent, but it certainly is one of the most important I've ever done. This is about enforcing the Constitution, how to keep government within its limits, and it requires action on a state, local, and individual level, which is absolutely essential. That'll be linked to in the show notes as well. Well, I really appreciate you spending some of your time with me today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope it encourages you to push forward for what is yet to get, to keep pushing on, having fortitude and perseverance like the father of the American Revolution told us to have. We cannot be satisfied with these efforts because as soon as we let up, they will push forward. Again, thank you so much for spending some of your time with me today. Hope you enjoyed the episode and hope to see you next time here on the path to liberty.